For any parent, it's their worst nightmare. You turn around for a moment and your child is gone. In that instant, everything changes. And from the moment the call comes into the police, the race is on. Welcome to the Double Crew podcast, where two ex-police officers crew up again for a shift of real and honest talk on policing and beyond. During this episode, we'll be discussing missing persons. Some of the topics we may discuss may be difficult for some listeners, so if you feel this may affect you, please stop listening now. We won't be offended. Our opinions are our own, based on personal experiences and from publicly available information. They do not necessarily represent the views of serving officers, police forces, or any other organisations. We are your hosts today. I'm Gavin. I'm an ex-police officer with 15 years experience. I left just over 10 years ago. Also here is...
I'm Steve, and I'm an ex-police officer, 10 years in the force and 4 years in the control room, and a bit of this and that in between.
So, Steve, we're going to discuss missing persons in this one. I think it's quite relevant because missing persons represent a huge amount of police time and the number of calls are quite significant. So I think a good place to start is to give a definition of what is a missing person, and then we'll go from there. The College of Policing define a missing person as anyone whose whereabouts cannot be established, will be considered as missing until located, and their well-being or otherwise confirmed. So that is a definition from the College of Policing, available on the College of Policing.
They couldn't make that any drier if they tried.
I know. But basically, you can't... So, well, it's quite important, I think, because it's not just about you don't know where they are, it's about well-being. And that, and we'll come on to that a bit later when we talk about risk assessments and things like this. Okay, to give an idea of the scale of the issue, we can look at some statistics, and we get these from the UK Missing Persons Unit, which is part of the National Crime Agency. So over 405,000 missing person calls were made to the UK police in 2023 to 2024. 304,674 missing person incidents were recorded. And these involved 146,540 individuals, showing many people go missing more than once. So that's the scale of the issue. So, Steve, the way I'd like to start this is I'd like to call upon your experience as a controller in the control room. I take it you took the calls, is that correct?
Yeah. So I started in the control room, and the first thing you do is start with taking 909 calls. Actually, they're easier to take because, let's face it, if someone going, help, get me help now, you take the address, you send a car, because you're not going to not send someone to a panicked person. So they're the fairly easy things to deal with, unless it's something major. But the public calls, that's where you have to take all of the information, like for harassments and things. But missing persons is one of those things that you take a lot of time, because there used to be at least a very lengthy form that you had to complete with what they were wearing, what they like, who they associate with, and a lot of police hours were spent on missing persons.
It's the biggest fear that every parent has, right? And I've been there, and many parents have been there. I'm sure you may well have as well. You turn around for a minute, you look back, and your child's gone.
Yeah.
And
why don't we play through that? Let's play through that scenario together.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go to the House of Fraser in a main town. There, big shopping centre, loads of places people can hide, multiple exits for the centre. Lady's out shopping with her daughter, and suddenly she turns around. She's looking at her dress. Turns around, the child's gone. Starts to look around. So immediately, that second that happens, a clock starts. Boom. Like a massive tick, 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 tick. Okay, and we call this the golden hour. And the golden hour begins from the second that child is missing.
I love these definitions. We both do. But I've got I say definition. I've got how the College of Policing talk about that golden hour. And they say the golden hour is the period immediately following the report of an offence or incident when positive action should be taken. So exactly as you say. This may include protecting, preserving, or gathering material that may otherwise be concealed, lost, damaged, altered, or destroyed.
And police officers know that, and we don't mess around because of that fact. So in that, the first thing you would do is you would say, the mum would have looked around, I suspect, start calling the child's name, can't find. We're looking 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of minutes for that. Then you get a member of staff involved. They call a manager, 5, 6, 7. We're probably 10 minutes involved. Oh, we can't find this child. Don't know what to do. Let's call the police. Between 8 and 10 minutes average for the call to get there. Now we're 20 minutes in already. This child's been gone. And you see how that time, that's 1/3 of your time is already gone. Okay, so as the police officer, you're on the back foot as you arrive there. You say, when was the last time you saw it? It's 20 minutes ago over there.
So the golden hour principles don't just apply to missing persons, they apply to any incident we go to. But of course, they're so much more prevalent in a missing person investigation, especially one that is deemed as high risk, and we can talk about risk in a second.
And you don't initially know what you're investigating. Are you investigating a missing child? Are you investigating a kidnapping? Are you investigating an abduction with an intent to commit a sexual crime? There are lots and lots of things could be there. So you're also trying to look around for suspects around at the same time as feeling empathetic, taking a missing person report, because you want to take things at face value. But you know, how many times do people go missing and then people cry crocodile tears, and you just don't know what you're facing.
No, exactly.
So, eyes open.
Absolutely. And to give a bit of reassurance, I think it's probably good to, at this stage to reassure parents and members of the public of how likely it is to be one of those extreme cases.
So
okay.
rare.
So only about 3%, and this is based on those figures, only about 3% of missing cases involve younger children. The main body of people that go missing are actually teenagers.
Care.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's certainly one of the factors. But often they're found within hours. So here we go. So 3.2% of missing incidents involve children aged 0 to 11 years. By comparison, 61.1% involve teenagers aged 12 to 17. So you're teenagers. Most missing people are found quickly. This is kind of a myth-busting bit. 82.9% of missing children are found within 24 hours. Of the initial report. 92.3% are found within 48 hours. So only 0.9% of missing children remain missing after 28 days. And children
they're the
is
ones that get all the headlines, and they're the ones that get all the news.
They do.
Not all of the successes and all of the found children and the children that returned home. It's the once in the blue moon.
Well, that's right. So, you know, it's very rare in my career. In 15 years, I never went to a child who, you know, that happened to. Okay. So that's that's 15 years of policing.
Lost children that have been gone for a while and but never been anything other than a lost child.
So going back to that scenario then, you're in the shopping centre, you've turned around, your child's gone. You start to look around, maybe you're calling out the child's name. And a really important part of this is there is a responsibility that's recognised by the College of Policing that's placed upon parents, right, and carers prior to it coming to the police. Okay? So there's an expectation that parents and carers and providers for both children and adults take reasonable steps to locate the missing person prior to a report to police. In that,
do you know what that was? That was because you used to go to carers who have kids that go missing time after time after time, and they used to say, I can't be bothered to ring you now. And we would say, well, it is your job to report them. We don't want to keep coming over and over and over. And I guess that's to plug that gap, that they have to cooperate and help to with the investigation. So it does make sense, really.
It does. It absolutely does. And particularly when you think of over 60% is that teenage bracket, right? So the calls come in to you in the control room, Steve. So we're 20, 30 minutes in. What is the sort of first thing before even a police officer's dispatched? What are you tasked with as that call taker?
The idea of a radio operator or a control room operator is to be a seamless brain, really, for the patrol that's on the street. Yeah. So when the call comes in, you'll have, hi there, I want to report my daughter's missing. They might be panicky. They probably would have come through on 999 for that. I can't find my daughter. She's 5 years old, gone missing, whatever. So what does a patrol need? First of all, you need to get a patrol on the way. So they need to know where to go. So we need a location. Now it's a huge shop, so we try and nail it down to, well, what section of the shop are you? Upstairs, downstairs? Are you here? Where can you make yourself known to the managers? So you want to locate that person straight away because she's vulnerable now because she's in a panic. Then once we've done that, we want to know what the child looks like so we can circulate it with CCTV, because CCTV, we're one of the most surveilled countries in the world. There's a lot of cameras all on the high streets and all around. So we want to get onto CCTV not only to do live, but we want them to also roll back the tapes till the last known time that child was with someone and just review and see if they pop out of an entrance or anything like that. I would be getting someone else on the phone, so the radio operator will have a backup operator, and I would say to them, right, I want you to phone that shop now, tell them to shut the exits. Okay, if you've got a 5-year-old missing, I'd get security to shut the exits of the shop and say, I'm really sorry, we're just going to hold you here for 2 seconds till we can locate a missing child.
Not only, because I think sometimes people think that, it's almost like you're just taking the call, right? You're just taking in the information. You're not really, are you? You're almost like you're doing that initial detective work. At the beginning. You're trying to get to the bottom of what's happened.
Ask as many questions as you can because you want to feed it to the patrol that's on the way there. And if you've ever seen a patrol when they're driving, they're on the radio, or they used to be, asking questions. Can you see this? Can you find out if the helicopter's available locally? Can you see if there's this, that? Because if that child, we've said an urban area, but say they're missing they've gone to a country park and they've gone for a wander and then they just haven't come back, then you're thinking you need a dog handler, you need a helicopter, you need to have, additional patrols. You might need to have the motorcycle team, so with their off-road bikes to get across it. Is there water? If there's water, then we either get our river team or we start to do multi-agency, where we start working with the fire brigade and stuff. You start with working with one or more emergency service. You start toying with the line of a major incident, and often if a child has gone missing for too long, it becomes a major incident.
With all the information that you're getting, you're making a risk assessment. Now, we can say for a young child who's gone missing, well, we know that's going to be high risk. That child needs somebody to. It might not be the same.
But why is a child missing a high risk?
Right. It's not the sole reason that they can't be located. It's will they come to any harm? Because how many times have you been to a missing person who you found, but they don't want people to know what the situation is? Like a lot of people, a lot of times I would go to.
Been cheating. Used to have it all the time. You'd have my husband didn't come home last night. Next day, they report him missing in the evening and walks in the morning. Oh, sorry, I slept in the park.
That's happened. And that's happened. We've had some big searches. There's some adultery going on or something like that. And and that's when you really get annoyed as a police officer. All these resources being thrown at something that was actually, it was a deliberate act to conceal their whereabouts. So when people make missing person reports, it's not always obvious that the police can't always tell you where they are. What we can do is we can feed back to the caller and say, well, they've been located safe and well. And that's about as much information as we can give, but they say they're no longer missing. So coming back to your original question, it's more about harm than anything else, right? While that person's whereabouts aren't known, are they likely? What is the likelihood of that person coming to harm? And the risk scales from very low to medium to high. In this case, if you're a child, let's say you're a child of 3, you can't feed yourself. Do you know what I mean? You can't cross a road. You're vulnerable to all sorts of things, and so that's why children of that sort of age are deemed as high risk. Okay,
and you'd also include like people with dementia. They're unable to control. They're non-compos mentis, or they're unable to find their way home, and they start following different patterns to usual. So you've got people with dementia, you've got people with learning disabilities, you have people who are diabetics and they're having an episode or a hypo. Often they can be confused and appear that they're drunk, and you find them wandering in the middle of nowhere. Hypothermia, you can find people sort of half naked in the garden because they feel like they're hot, and that sort of, you would consider if it's a really cold evening, if it's snowy, if it's icy. The prevailing conditions also make a big difference too.
Absolutely. And it obviously that level of risk affects the response that we're going to give it, right? As police officers. We spoke about dynamic risk assessments in the pursuit video, but dynamic risk assessments apply across the board for all sorts of different things. In this scenario, it's really at the very first point the call comes into the call taker that you're making that risk assessment.
Yeah.
Because you're deciding, so it's a big responsibility.
You know within a few seconds how serious it is. You know, the first thing the person says, you can hear how worried they sound, and then it's how old is the person, and they say, oh, they're 5. You immediately go, ooh, well, but if they said they're 16, but then they say, well, I haven't seen them for 3 days, and they were knocking around with this guy who we didn't really know, and this is really out of character, and she never does this, and all of those aspects suddenly make the risk go up and up and up and up. You can have the same scenario. It's cold out, and he's 25 years old. He's wearing a coat. He's a regular walker. He's pretty fit and he's out. It is cold. It's 5 degrees, but I think he's pretty capable. Those same conditions, if you said, oh, she's 85 and she's out in her pajamas, suddenly it's a critical incident. But missing persons is our bread and butter of what we do, really. It's kind of the first person you think of to call when you're worried about someone or lost. That's the police's job, isn't it, to go and find them?
But it's very difficult when it's a high-risk missing person for the person who's effectively panicking about the situation to sort of try and make rational decisions. Do you know what I mean? How many times have you gone to an incident where somebody's all over the place, and the moment you give them a job, the moment you give them something to focus on, they're right at it, because you're changing that energy, you're turning it from...
I used to do sudden deaths. If I was there and it was an older person and it was their partner that's died, the first thing I say, do you know what, I'm parched, shall we have a cup of tea, would you mind making me one? And they'd be a little bit like, look at you, and then they think, oh, yeah, okay, then. And they'd go into the kitchen. And actually, the act of doing something familiar, grounding, an easy task to put your mind on, it helps to get them back under control.
So that call, Steve, what level of response is that officer going to respond to?
It would be an immediate call.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason being is there's a risk to life and limb, really, which is the primary function of an officer, is to protect life and limb and property. If a child is unsupervised by any adult and is unable to look after itself, then by definition it could come to harm. So therefore we need to get there as soon as possible.
And for those who don't know what an immediate call is, that's your blue lights and your sirens. That's an emergency call. So the police, they're en route, blue lights, sirens, trying to get to the location as fast as they can, because we know, as we talked about golden hour, every minute counts. And the quicker we're there, the quicker we can start the cogs turning, we can start making decisions. So I've responded, I've got there, I've arrived. What does that look like? That first interaction with that member of public. What are we thinking? We've got a very distressed mother, father, whoever's there, maybe with some security staff or, whatever, or members of staff there. What are we going to do first, Steve?
So let's assume that CCTV's been updated. Let's assume that they've started to cover the exits and close that down so that we have a perimeter to search, yeah? Right. So what we need to do is then exclude somewhere. So what we start small and work out a maximum distance the child could have gone. So on foot, a child, would be travelling not a particularly fast speed. The maximum they could have got is maybe half a mile. Do you know, something like
on their
that?
own?
On their own, probably no more than half a mile. So I would have a roaming patrol floating around the neighbourhood, probably maybe 3 or 4 roaming patrols just looking around with CCTV, checking around, seeing what's moving around, see if any cars are lurking around or just anything like that at all. Then inside, I'd be going up to the mum and I would be saying, I need a picture and a description. And that I would take down. That would be my notebook. That would be my first description, evidentially.
Yep.
So that is, if you, as a police officer, you'll know first description means a lot, especially when it comes to ID procedures and all things like that. I would get a first description of it, see if there's a photo of the child on the phone. If there is, that would be bing. I'd email that out to everyone straight away so that we know who we're looking for.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood? The likelihood, we don't go for crazy theories and conspiracies and things like that. The likelihood the kid's hiding somewhere under a clothes rail and has fallen asleep,
Right.
or is in the
Right.
changing room, or in the toilets
Absolutely.
and the locks come off and they're locked in the bathroom, or something like that, is most likely. We always assume the worst case, and it's most of the time it's the most simple thing. So a systematic search of the shop would mean the next step, I would say.
Absolutely, and that I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I can quote an incident that I went to, and it was a 3-year-old, myself and a colleague. We had exactly this, but it wasn't a shopping centre. It wasn't, but it was actually a home. It was somebody's
Okay.
home. They called in. They've said, the front door's open.
Hmm.
We can't find our child. Okay, they're 3. So that immediate calls come in. Obviously, the call handler's taken the details, assessed as high, all that stuff's going on. We're getting to the scene, we're making progress, and we are on arrival. We meet with the informant, the lady. After we've taken the initial details, we say, we're going to search your house. And she couldn't understand it. She said, well, I've searched my house. I've turned my house upside down. I've turned it upside down. You need to be out there looking for the child. It's one of those things not everyone's prepared for. Is that the very first thing we do, even if you've searched your house, is we will search your house
Well,
again.
it's because they think that we're accusing them, don't they? They think that there's some kind of malice to that, whereas
Or that they've covered it and there's absolutely nowhere they can go. Now, in this prime example of it, so here we've got a 3-year-old missing, we've got cars coming in, resources are being sent, and we said, no, we are going to search it. Okay, we totally understand. We've got other cars coming, but we must search. And we found her in the wardrobe.
yeah,
And she'd been hiding, bless her heart, for hours because she was scared. You could see she was scared that, people were shouting around the house saying, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And she got scared. So she was playing hide and seek probably initially or something like that, got scared and then didn't want to come out. She was under clothes in the bottom of a wardrobe. And she'd been there for some time. So that's a prime example of why we search on arrival, that initial search.
something we search, like a technique we use. We don't actually search for the thing. We search for voids. That's a little trick of the trade that perhaps we can share, and that is.
Well, it's Pulsar, isn't it?
Whenever you're thinking about where you can, where could this child be, don't think about sort of the child itself. Think about, right, is that hole big enough to fit a child? Could a child fit up in that loft? That vent there. How big is that?
There?
Could you get in there? If they could, you look in there and you search for the voids and eliminate those, like the bed. Oh, well, hang on, it's a divan bed. There's a void in that. What could it be in there?
Yeah.
And that's systematic. If it ever got to a real serious pulsar search, that's what they're looking for. Any void that you can find, including the cavity in the wall.
So for our listeners, a pulsar is a their police search advisor. These are trained people, and they kind of made up the TAC team a lot of the time, didn't they?
Yeah.
That we had. These were specially trained officers that were given additional training in search techniques. Okay, so we've done the initial search, and the likelihood is we're probably going to find this child nearby. Let's say that doesn't happen. We don't find the child in that immediate golden hour. Where do we go next?
In the first instance, I used to do it for my team. I used to love dealing with mispers, so I'd always take them on. I'd like the juicy ones where they were lost and we couldn't find. I like to set out a grid, and I was very good at managing all the resources. And I used to do the instant command vehicle. But essentially, what you need to do is you identify a rendezvous point. So that needs to be somewhere that's got enough height so that the vans can get in, or any equipment that needs to come through. So no height limits. Big car parks. So sometimes if you ever see like 20 police vehicles all in the back of a B&Q car park or something looking fairly serious, that might be a rendezvous point for an incident that's occurring nearby. So your first job would be, right, this is where we want everyone to meet. This is what resources we need. This is how we do. You would have the helicopter, and then that incident would be taken off of the main police radio and would be dealt with completely off air, and those officers would be allocated to that instant and would no longer be answering calls. They would be dedicated to that job until the job's done, and that can mean working for 20 hours if it means working for 20 hours.
Yeah, it really can. It can, and and over time starts getting dished out, doesn't it?
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
because
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
incident will then have money, a budget attached to it, and
Mhm.
that budget will fund overtime. But officers very rarely get the choice whether they do the overtime. They just have to stay and help search, which, to be fair, most people don't have a problem with really for
No,
that
no,
kind of
no,
incident.
no. So there's certainly appoint a senior investigative officer, if you mentioned.
Yes,
You know,
silver, which is generally an inspector or a chief inspector. Um, Often the force control room inspector takes the silver command for most of the time, and then gold will be an ACPO rank of some description,
yeah, yeah.
normally for
So,
ACPO.
so that sort of incident, so that high risk child, it's going to get the response. It's going to get that, all those resources coming in, and it'll be urgent. So, what happens then, Steve, when it's not a high risk? So let's go to the other end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
Let's go to what constitutes a low risk or a very low risk
Yeah.
um, missing person.
Again, it's circumstances. So a person in themselves can be low risk. You or I are low risk. Or a woman or whatever of any age, between about 18 and I don't know 75, something like that, are normally compos mentis, are normally able to cross a road and look after themselves. So unless they have an illness or something going on, severe depression or something like that, they're generally assumed to be able to look after their own life, and they should be left alone to be free. And the Human Rights Act says that the police should not unduly interfere with people's lives. So if people don't want to be found, we shouldn't be looking for them.
No.
They have a right not to have their life intruded by the state as well. And often that used to really piss people off, because you'd have a wife or someone and say, I think my husband's at this house with his girlfriend or wherever, I've reported him missing, and they want us to go and look, and we're like, well, no, that's not our job to make sure that
No.
he's there. He's an adult. You're not actually worried about his safety.
And you kind of
just
know
want to
where
know
he
where
is.
he is.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
difference between a missing person, I would say, with my definition is, there's a difference between wanting to know where someone is and then someone being at severe risk because we don't know where they are. So a non-risk person, so say it's you, a non-risk
Yeah.
person,
I've been reported missing.
I can immediately make you high risk if I say you have early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or he has to take insulin every 6 hours, otherwise he'll get that. Suddenly a clock's ticking for it. So the circumstances can change. Or there's nothing wrong with you, but we know that there's people out that want to hurt you, and you all got gangsters after you. You owe a drugs debt, or you do whatever. The circumstances can make a difference. Your personal characteristics can make a difference, and also like the surrounding suspicious circumstances. Like I had a guy once. He went last seen running along, taking his clothes off and jumping into the river.
Yeah.
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 And he'd not long been released from custody.
Right.
So at that point, what would you say? That's pretty high risk.
That's pretty high. That's right up there. Yeah. You don't
that's
get much
pretty high
higher.
risk. We know that that's happened. We couldn't find him. We had to. We spent 2 days searching and gave up in the end.
Yeah.
And ironically, I was the one who was coordinating that incident until we handed it over to the brass. I did the initial stuff. And then we handed it over, and his body was reported a month later down at the local weir, and I went down and had to get him out of the river. So
And that
I
happens
sort of,
quite often in
Yeah.
rivers. Do you remember there was that lady, wasn't there, who was, it was all in the news, wasn't it? And they'd searched everywhere. They said, we've covered this area, but quite often they're found so far away, because the river's taken them, and they reappear later.
Normally
that does happen.
the bodies don't really float until about 20 days plus. So to start with, then the body gas is released enough that after about 21 days you'd expect, and we was waiting, so we knew the body would probably pop up.
Yeah.
But up until that point, we didn't know if he was, if it was a true sighting or what you had. But that was a case that the circumstances made it immediately high risk.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see or to hear how quickly you got to you exhausted all lines of inquiry
Yeah.
in that, because you can exhaust them very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because
It was all action at start. It's all action at start. Everyone's screaming around in their blue lights and up and down the river, and they all get their lights out, and they've got the dragon lamps, they used to call them, shining them on the river and the banks, and everyone was searching. And then you're thinking, oh, we'll get the divers out. The divers will be good. Divers can't come till tomorrow. But let's get the fire brigade. They get a little boat and they ride up and down. No sign of it, but they're shining their light. And then after that, you're thinking, well, there's no evidence. We've got his clothes. We know who it is. We've got his clothes.
they've gone into the river.
We
So
know
not
they've
gone
gone
round
in
to
the
a
river.
friend. We've not gone round to a friend's house.
There's no crime scene per se because it's water. So the water's flowing. So there's nothing to secure as a crime scene. So really, all we know is this guy might have committed suicide there and has now vanished. And as I say, it was a strange one. They had dog handlers walking up and down, because I think the biggest fear in that circumstance is anything that if he just in the morning you find him 2 foot away from where he jumped in and you didn't see it or you didn't spot. That's the fear you are. Don't be the one who didn't see. So you want,
and that can drive you quite often. That can drive it. I don't want to be the. We used to have it with RTCs. They always say check the hedgerow, didn't they? If someone's been thrown from a vehicle, because it's very easy to miss that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If in a crash that someone's
and who wants
in
to
the
be
hedge.
the one that misses it? You know, you never live it down.
No. So I suppose the only other thing you could say is sort of ongoing inquiries. Maybe they did get out the river, in the, and make their way. So, but often in those cases, they'll turn up. The report's already been made. It's been distributed via the police national computer. People are aware. So as soon as they appear, someone calls it in and says they've been found, and then we go and do the follow-up checks and everything else.
And as I say, the majority of missing persons are teenagers, and they just stay out too late, or they're told to be home at 10 and they go up yours, and they come home in the morning. The missing person gets out, cancelled, so that often you used to have to go round, see the missing. Do you know how naughty you are doing that and how much time you waste?
Yeah.
Up yours, copper. And then they do it all again the next day, and it's just it's a merry-go-round.
And it's very easy in that, right, to get complacent as well as a police officer. If you've gone to the same person, right, 3-4 times, they've gone missing again. It's crying wolf, isn't it? And they're, but you have to respond in the same way.
But we say that, you say crime wolf, but we blame the victim. Because if that child has been able to go missing on 5 occasions, and we deem them high risk each time, right, that they go missing, are we failing to protect that child by allowing it to go missing 5 times in the first place? Or are we saying, oh, she's the problem because she didn't listen to what she was told to do? Well, we know she won't. That's why she's in care. And that's why they're putting in boundaries.
You're right, because, you have to look at the multi-agency side of it.
Why are all these agencies involved, and yet this child is still able to put herself at high risk every week?
That's it. And then, you talk about social services, if they're in foster care, all those sorts of questions, and
that child is still missing once a week, hanging around with people that they shouldn't be. So that's a systemic failure by every agency, isn't it? If that child can still, and I think it might be better nowadays. As I say, I'm out of date.
I can tell you that from missing persons, part of the response of missing persons, and this again comes from the College of Policing website, which gives directions. They call it a authorised professional practice directions that police follow, and they say that there should be or they should consider, as part of a missing person investigation, towards the latter part of it, you should consider multi-agency review. Right, so that is police, social services, whoever's involved with this individual comes together to discuss, even if they've been found or it's a repeated problem, that should happen. That multi-agency discussion should happen to prevent this happening again, especially if it's 4 or 5 times. But quite often it is the same people, and the statistics we gave at the beginning back that up. Of all the 304,000 missing person reports, that related to only 146,000 individuals. So that's the same people going missing again and
over
again.
and over, Which bears out with what I've seen anecdotally on the street is that you go to the same people, and then every now and again you get a major one. So a couple of interesting things to throw in for you then. So obviously I used to do the searches, and I did the critical stripes training and stuff, and some of that is how to search.
Yes.
So dementia patients, really interesting question I used to ask them is, what era are they currently in? So if you have someone with dementia in your life, have a think about where they are in their life, because if they go missing, they're likely to follow their old routine. Or
Yes.
so if you think, I think my dad thinks he's in his 40s, and you say, well, what did he do? Oh, he worked at the tree ball mint factory, or he worked at Quick Fit in wherever. Then it might be, oh, what did he do that day? Oh, he used to get up and he used to walk to work every day, and he'd always walk towards, and there was a tree-lined route that you used to do. And then you would then go, right, if you was walking around and didn't know your own mind, and you was just walking on instinct, where would you go?
Yeah.
And you'd walk out your door and you'd go, right, I'm off to work. And then so they look a bit like the trees, and that's an interesting one. The other thing is they walk downhill as well. If you're not thinking about where you're going, you tend to walk downhill.
You don't go up. It's not it's the least struggle, isn't it? It's the lesser. And actually, that's a really good point, because the number of high risk missing persons I went to is quite a number. Actually, I think over my career, of people who had left their home. They might be in their pajamas. They might be in their 90, and they've walked off. And you might get the call in saying, well, "I've just seen someone walking down the road in their 90, or into the woods, or whatever it is." And that happens a lot. It's a really valuable bit.
And the other scary one I always used to find is, well, I had it a couple of times, is you'd find somebody and have no idea who they are. They've got no ID on them.
Yeah.
And they won't or can't tell you who they are. And sometimes they'll tell you they're Jesus. Or they're and you're like, oh, and it'll be dark, and they'll be like, I am the Son of God, and I'm here to save you, and you're like,
and it's
oh,
impossible.
my God.
You think, what do I? You might not even have a call because it's late at
Yeah,
night.
no, you just found this person who's wandering. Or
I've had
the guy I found, he was in a pair of pants, and he had no idea who he was. Thought he was Jesus, no identification on him at all. So I was like, what do we do with him? And I was like, well, just stick him in the car. We'll take him back to Nick, and we'll stick him on the live scan and do his fingerprints. And then the sergeant's like, no, you can't do that. You haven't committed a crime.
No,
you can't just go scooping people off the street and doing that. And I was like, oh yeah.
Actually, it's a bit of a segue to that, which is really, again, not everybody knows this, is that any forensics that are obtained via a missing person investigation, once they're found, are binned.
Oh, I didn't.
They don't retain them on the police national database.
They're
not allowed to.
Because it's not evidence. Is
no,
it?
they're not allowed to. No, so they get rid of it. So if your fingerprints have been taken as part of,
I'll tell you a question I've always had, and that maybe you can answer, is dental records. They always say, "Oh, we identified them from dental records."
Yeah.
But does everybody have dental records then?
They must do.
And where are they kept?
You think
are they kept centrally, or how do dental records work?
Well, actually, that's a really good point, because you think on the
maybe
NHS,
we could put that out to our fans.
Yeah,
have you got any dentists out there? Do you get contacted by coppers and say, who are these gnashers belonging to?
Yeah, well, actually, you're probably right, because I guess for the NHS ones, there is the NHS record, but maybe for private, I don't know. Who knows? Someone tell us.
Or do they have to suspect it's that? Then they go to their dentist and say, I think that's Steve. So then you go to Steve's dentist, and then you say, have you got any teeth x-rays?
Yeah.
Or is there a database of teeth out there?
Yeah. I actually had a dentist years ago who went out, for the tsunami over in Thailand. And he was doing identification. I mean, what a job.
Oh, man.
He was doing
I remember that. Used to get a supplement, because I put my name down for it, and it was body recovery, and they needed volunteers. They can't make you do it, but they needed volunteers in the event of an explosion or an incident to go and collect body parts. Oof. And they needed it, and I'm sure you got a slightly extra payment if you was willing to do the fingerprinting of the parts.
Yeah.
So you would then fingerprint, if you found a hand or a finger, you'd have to fingerprint it and stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember everyone who used to try and get to the accident to get that payment, that extra £1,000 payment?
What was it? I can't remember the deal of that though.
It was, wasn't it? It was like you could get compensation for really like.
If it was really bad.
If it was really, I might include this. If it was really bad, you could get compensation, and what they didn't factor in was that officer was like, "I'm go."
Yeah. But the trouble is, you're tough as old boots, really,
I know,
aren't
I
you?
know. You talk about bringing divers and having the, I call it fire brigade, but rescue services they are commonly called now. But I think we ought to pay tribute to community search and rescue
Oh,
teams.
yeah,
Yeah,
KSAR,
yeah. So there are community search teams out there that are trained that work alongside the police. We're not talking about people just turn up to help, which are
In some ways, I think they're better than the police.
brilliant
Because they
because
do
that's their
it.
job.
That's their thing, and they do it day in. And my
Mm.
brother was a member. He used to work for them, and he used to go out. And it's a little bit like the fire brigade. You know, you get the call, we got a job. And I said, like, I asked him, what do you spend most of your time? And actually, the majority of what they do is like a walker will go, I've gone off, I've fallen over, I've bust my ankle, I can't get out. And they're in the middle of a woodland, in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere. They spend a lot of time going and helping those as well as doing the searches.
And they're very specialised as well, because quite a few people, because, you know, I remember when I learnt to scuba dive, a guy was talking, he was saying how his family had been involved in that side of things, because, you know, they've got all the skills, right?
They're first aiders, and
and
they always have these big sticks that make them look really impressive.
Okay, they wear, yeah, they got their own uniforms. But I mean, I tell you what, I often wondered how well the police could function without them. If I'm honest, they became very reliant on them.
The police need the community. We need them to be the eyes and the ears, and we need them to see the bad people in their communities and say, we're not going to accept this.
I do find in searches that people are so willing to help. Like, everyone wants to help in that situation. You know, it's a complete contrast to you turning, oh, I'm trying to nick someone. You know, not everyone wants to get involved in that.
Well, I've got a funny story about that, because I was searching for this old lady that had gone missing, and we was in an area that's very well known for gypsies and travellers, and I was always having dust up with them, and I was a local copper there, and they were up to no good, and I was trying to stop them, and it got fractious at times. However, I realised this woman was missing, and I went over and I said, guys, we need some help. We've got lost this person. We haven't got quad bikes or anything. She's gone wandering in the orchards. Any chance one of you could send me your boys down? Well, they pulled out the stops.
They did.
There was like an army of quad bikes that come from everywhere, horses, and they searched for hours.
Amazing.
And really restored my faith. Do you know what I mean? Because although maybe we have different morals or we have different, you know, differences, when it comes down to it, we're all humans, and we all want to go and find someone's mum when she's lost.
You know, it takes a
what I mean?
lot for someone to want another person to suffer, right?
Oh,
and
exactly
And,
right,
you know,
exactly
people
right.
tend to, you know, these situations bring out the best in people. But certainly, I've always had help from people, and it's well received.
But with that, be warned of the well-wisher. There is always the chance of a return to the crime scene, and that's
Well,
the
we
thing.
had that with Ian Huntley, didn't we?
You have to keep that in your mind. Well, not just Ian Huntley. When there was people like Ted Bundy and some of the greatest serial killers in all time, often would revisit their crime scenes.
Yeah. Or watch what's going on, right?
And watch,
They want to see the
they're
impact.
narcissists. They're narcissists. They're psychopaths. They want to see what they've done and everyone talking about them, and they want to hear.
They want to see the sirens. They want to see
exactly. That's it, and they want that, and it's so rare that it almost doesn't matter. But when it does, it's everything.
And that's why you have to pay attention. And that's where, you know, with those high risk ones, you get detectives involved. You know, you have your senior investigator officer, you have a detective who's assigned to it, and it goes through a whole review process. You know, so you go from that initial response to detective. But I would say the detective side starts probably at the beginning. You know, we're all detectives in a way. We're asking questions. We're trying to work out what's going on. So let's go to searches then. Let's do stereotypical woodland. Okay, we know from, I don't know if you remember, but there seems to be some affinity with water for people who went missing in rural locations. You know, there was some statistic, I can't quote it.
So water's a natural barrier. So what I would do is, so say for example we get a walker and you're in a park and they say, I was walking with my little boy and he's gone missing. I can't see him. He's been gone however long, 15 minutes. What have you got to do? Well, first of all, we want a helicopter, because a bird's eye view is going to be difficult. I imagine in the police now they've got access to drones as well. We want a drone. If there's a drone available, I want a drone. I want that. I want a dog handler, and I want 4 other patrols to come out and help me. Because what you need is you need to have one person with the parent. Because what you don't want is the parent missing at the time you find the child. You want to be able to reunite the two of them, not then go, oh, God, where's mum?
It's interesting you mentioned drones there, because I got trained. I got my license, right? I got a operation authorization for drones, for heavy drones up to 50 kilograms and stuff like that. And then I approached the police and I said, hey, I can do some thermal imaging and stuff. I said, well, no, we get our specials to do it.
Really?
Damn it, I can't even get paid for this stuff, because I thought, search and rescue drones, fantastic tool, because the cost of getting the helicopter out, and the helicopter would have thermal imaging, right? So it'd be really effective, but a drone in that environment must be so useful now.
Yeah, definitely. Again, this is a question for any serving coppers. That can you tell us, are they using drones regularly? How are they using them? I would imagine they're a good bit of kit if you can get them.
I can tell you that, if you're doing it proper, I don't know how emergency services always have some exemptions left, right, and centre for things, but I know from my planning of drone flights, it takes longer to plan a drone flight than a real flight. Right,
oh, really?
Like aircraft, because there was a lot of legislation. It's new tech, so there's this tendency to sort of overregulate. But anyway, coming back to it, so water I knew was a if we get to water sources, like you say, a natural barrier where someone can't cross it, or it's downhill. Often water's downhill off a bank, so it's a ravine, whatever it is. You quite often found people at the edge of a bank, and I remember we used to have did you used to ever use a thermal camera? I remember we used to take it out. We borrowed it from
twice. I could never get the bloody thing to work.
but I never get when it got sinister once. The first time I was searching woodland, I can't remember the officer I was with, but I remember this experienced officer when we're going into woodland. And it's all a bit eerie. It's sort of 2-3 in the morning. We're looking, we're trying to find this person, and he said, "Don't forget to look up." And I was like, what I'm looking at, and then it dawned on me. Are we looking at someone who's looking to harm themselves, to take their own life? And there are reports of people who've missed. You've searched an area, but you haven't looked up and you haven't seen. Because you're constantly focused on the ground. You always see people doing fingertip searches and sort of looking down, poking in bush and stuff. Look up. Always, and it's an awful thing to say, but if you look at, because people do go into woodland, and that does happen, right? So, when you're searching, and officers know this, when you're searching, that is a consideration. I remember when that was first told to me, it was quite a moment,
Bit of a shock,
and
it's always weird when you're looking for someone who might have hurt themselves. I've had it a couple of times and found, and it's not fun. And you go in and it's horrible. It's like hide and seek, where eventually you're going to find something awful, and that's not fun. And
it's kind of like my going in the house, that first sudden death.
You
know it's there, it's somewhere here, and you're just waiting to come across it.
But again, missing persons generally do not end that way. The
No.
majority don't. Okay, so with a missing person, there are a couple of other practical things to consider.
Yep.
So we've got the description. Associates. Who do they hang out with? Who are they known to hang out with? Places they go, frequent, school, clubs, anything like that they've been. Phone book. Go through the phone book. You ring all the numbers. Do you know this person? When did you last see them? Oh, have you seen them? Because often you'll just ring up a random friend. That was one I used to try. So they won't answer their phone, and their best mate won't answer their phone. But if you just ring some random friend that's in their phone book and just say, "Hey, have you seen them recently?" And they go, "Yeah, they were outside school today smoking a fag. I saw them on their bike," or whatever. And then you realise, oh, they're okay.
Well, actually, and that's a really good point, because you think nowadays, we didn't have this, but nowadays all the kids are on Snapchat, like tracking each other. Like, it must be so much easier to find the whereabouts now compared to
suicidal people. Christ almighty, I spent forever searching for them everywhere. Like you have to pay like 50 grand or something ridiculous to ping their phone to get them to triangulate where the phone was last seen. I mean, now you can see people on Snapchat friends.
Well, this is
You know
it,
what I
or
mean?
Live 360, or those apps and things
Yeah.
like that. So, yeah, that must have really changed. But I remember, do you remember the effort you had to go through to get triangulation?
Oh man,
It
it was
had
almost
to,
impossible.
they almost had to be near deceased, right?
Yeah.
They were going to,
Yeah, but that was because it cost about 50 grand. It was extraordinarily
and
expensive.
for people listening, triangulation was basically your mobile phone signal. You go off 3 masts to work out 2. It can sort of be done, but 3 is better, to work out where your mobile phone is. And it gave a radius. It never pinpointed you. It gave a radius that you could search, but you could only ever use that. Obviously, we had to have a competing need against your right to privacy to be able to do it. And usually that was like a threat to life.
But there is a complete difference. There's 2 types of missing person. You've got your ongoing, progressing emergency incident that's a 999 version, and then you have a slow burn inquiry that normally solves itself after 24 hours. So you don't get particularly excited for the first 24 hours.
No.
But if anything triggers in the meantime, oh, hang on a second, this is going up and up and up in risk. Eventually, that speeds the response up.
Yeah, we talked earlier about searching the house, but let's talk about searching the bedroom, the missing person's bedroom. One of the things the police do is go into their personal space. And they will search for things like letters. We'll really do a deep search of their diary. Oh, do people keep diaries? It's all on their phone, isn't it? But we'd search for any indication in the house. So I think people need to be prepared for that as well, because the officer will ask to search in depth the bedroom or their private space. And we had one that from that search, it was a teenager. I think she was 13 or 14. She made her way up to London. It was her whole thing. She wanted to go to London, and I think it was drawings or something. She'd written a letter or a poem or something like that indicated that's what she wanted to do. And because of that, we ended up going up to London and checking CCTV. And she was subsequently found later. But yeah, she'd met up with someone who phoned in. But it gives you a clue, right? So those personal things.
Well, and you do have children that are being groomed, and you do have children that are, involved in criminal activity as well.
Yeah.
They're often very unlovable children at times. They're 15, 16. They're bloody horrible. And they're out dealing drugs and being a drug runner, but they're also a victim too. They're a very vulnerable person who's also doing very horrible things at the same time.
But
that's a difficult thing.
To reassure people, like as we said, 92.3% of teenagers, children, are found within 48 hours. Like, so it's less than 1%. And another reassuring statistic, I'll chuck another one in. Adults that are still missing after 28 days. What do you think? What's your guess? What would you guess?
Well, it's a percentage.
How many adults are still missing after, or how many adults are found within 28 days?
I'd say most. I'd say like 99%, something like that.
Close, 96.5% of missing adults are found within 28 days.
And a lot of missing adults don't want to be found. And actually, in the control room, believe it or not, we used to deal with a lot of incidents straight away, because you'd get a missing person report. I haven't seen my husband. He's been missing 3 days. Or okay, thanks very much. Well, we'll start the investigation, send someone around. And the first thing you'd do is you'd do a search on your husband and then ring him up. And he'd answer straight away first time. Hello. You're like, you've been reported missing.
Have I?
Oh, tell her to sod off. Or, or vice versa. You would always have it. And quite often you could ring up and you'd get straight through and they just weren't answering to the person who's reporting.
But obviously concerning.
And you do have these weird bunny boiler people who ring up and report their partner missing because they don't know where they are, or they're their ex-partner. Oh, I don't know where and they're doing it because they want to find out where they are. So originally, when you asked, what can people really expect from the police when they attend?
Yeah.
And I would say they can expect a thorough interview on the phone about the circumstances, descriptions, and etc. An officer will attend quite promptly and will take information if it's a medium or a high risk. If it's low risk, it might be slower. But they'll come, they'll search the bedroom, They will take information from you and they will give you realistic explanations. That officer will then start conducting inquiries locally, making phone calls, visiting addresses, known associates, etc., to try and track them down. Then if they can't, it then starts to escalate. Right, we've done all the initial stuff and we can't find it. Now we're starting to get a bit more worried. It then escalates and escalates and escalates until, you start getting to the point this is now becoming high risk by virtue of how long the person's been missing. And then you allocate more resources, and eventually the more resources and the more time spent, the more likely you are to find that person.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, that's a missing person inquiry.
Yeah.
And we don't stop till we find them. Even if it's 10 years later, there are missing persons on the books that have been missing for decades.
Yeah, but it is such a big volume of calls, a large volume of calls to the police are missing people. So there is very much a process. And if you want to find out more about it, you can go onto the College of Policing website in terms of the response you can expect from the police. You can also go to the UK Missing Persons Unit website, which is part of the National Crime Agency, and on there's good advice for people who report people missing, and they talk about things like putting posters up around, all those things that you can do, additional things that you can do to assist.
And you've also got people like the Royal British Legion as well. They can help if the person you're looking for was like they joined the army and you lost touch. They can help you find veterans. The Salvation Army are really good at helping find homeless charities. People. So if you had, a brother that was a heroin addict and you lost touch, they may well have come into contact with Salvation Army and they can help you reconnect. So some of those people who've been missing a very long time, they're not technically missing, but do you know what I mean? You lost connection with somebody.
That's important to mention, because they make that distinction. They said just because you're trying to get in contact with someone and you can't doesn't mean they're a missing person. Well, thank you very much for taking your time out this evening, Steve. I know you've had a long day. I know, what I would like to say to people is if you can help us by following the Facebook channel, subscribing to YouTube, or liking any of the videos, or even the shorts that I put out. Hopefully you're not sick and tired of them. We love them. Help. Yeah, it does all help. We hope to see you again in a week's time for another topic.
Definitely. Suggest away. We're always game for any topic to discuss.
Yeah. Wonderful. Goodbye for now.